Hey everybody, this is Kevin again. So today was the big vote that happened in the UN, the emergency meeting, and on the status of Jerusalem, and a lot of different ambassadors got up and spoke for their country, and most of them got up and spoke in favor of basically condemning President Trump for declaring Jerusalem as Israel's capital, or they're basically asking for him to take it back. Say, no, don't do that. Take it back. Don't declare Jerusalem as Israel's capital. It's not. Well, it always has been, okay? In God's eyes, it's always been. Jerusalem is the city that he put his name on. So what you're going to see here in a little bit is two different video clips. One of them is of Nikki Haley, the ambassador of the United States to the UN, making comments that she made today, which were excellent. And then right after her, the comments from Danon, who's the ambassador of Israel to the UN. And his comments were very good as well. You're going to see that. It's going to be kind of a long video because you're going to see both of their comments that they made at the UN, and then you're going to see, after that, you're going to see a clip of when they actually have the vote itself and what the results of the vote is. I can tell you already beforehand there were 128 votes in favor of the resolution, which means that they are against the United States for declaring Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and there were 9 that were in 9 no's, okay? So 128 yeses and 9 no's. 2 of them were obviously from the United States and Israel, and there was a few other countries, 7 other countries that also voted no. And then there were 35 countries that abstained, that just didn't vote one way or the other. This vote doesn't do anything really. Even though it was 128 yeses, it's not going to change anything. And Nikki Haley basically mentioned that. She said the only thing it is going to change is the fact that we're going to take note of what happens and how you vote today. And that will basically have a negative or positive impact on those countries based on how they voted. If they voted for it, which means they voted against the United States and had disrespect for our country and for Israel, those countries, as President Trump said, I think yesterday or 2 days ago, those countries will no longer receive foreign aid from the United States. They're not going to get the kind of help that they've been getting before. We've been giving way too much money to these other countries and helping them out and paying their way in the UN. You know, the fact that we have the United Nations building actually in New York City to begin with is something that our country is paying for to maintain that building. And President Trump had said before that a lot of these countries are not pulling their weight. They're not paying their fair share for being in the UN and the cost of the United Nations building. Okay, so basically, he told Nikki Haley, we're going to take names, and we're going to note which ones are coming against the United States and against Israel, and that's going to have an effect, a drastic effect, as far as the money that they would get from our country. I noticed some of the countries that voted for this were the UK, for one. They're an ally of ours. A lot of the European countries voted for it, okay? And obviously, all of the Muslim nations voted for it. So, I think that President Trump, what he said and what Nikki Haley said, was right on target. And remember this. You remember what God said to Abraham. Those that bless thee shall be blessed. Those that curse thee shall be cursed. It's a blessing when you bless Israel, when you bless Jerusalem. I would almost look for these countries that went against the United States and Jerusalem and against Israel today are going to experience some kind of judgment from God because of it. We'll see what happens. But anyway, this is the introduction to the video, and I'm going to let you see both of these video segments. And I think you'll get some good insight into this. I think you'll enjoy it. But you'll see how this goes and what this may lead to next. We don't know yet. We don't know if it's going to lead into a conflict or war that's going to happen in the Middle East, but it could be very soon. As a result of all this, we're just going to have to see. So here's the videos. Keep watching.
I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President. To its shame, the United Nations has long been a hostile place for the State of Israel. Both the current and the previous Secretary Generals have objected to the UN's disproportionate focus on Israel. It's a wrong that undermines the credibility of this institution, and that, in turn, is harmful for the entire world. I've often wondered why, in the face of such hostility, Israel has chosen to remain a member of this body. And then I remember that Israel has chosen to remain in this institution because it's important to stand up for yourself. Israel must stand up for its own survival as a nation, but it also stands up for the ideals of freedom and human dignity that the United Nations is supposed to be about. Standing here today, being forced to defend sovereignty and the integrity of my country, the United States of America, many of the same thoughts have come to mind. The United States is by far the single largest contributor to the United Nations and its agencies. We do this in part in order to advance our values and our interests. When that happens, our participation in the UN produces great good for the world. Together, we feed, clothe, and educate desperate people. We nurture and sustain fragile peace in conflict areas throughout the world. And we hold outlaw regimes accountable. We do this because it represents who we are. It is our American way. But we'll be honest with you. When we make generous contributions to the UN, we also have a legitimate expectation that our goodwill is recognized and respected. When a nation is singled out for attack in this organization, that nation is disrespected. What's more, that nation is asked to pay for the privilege of being disrespected. In the case of the United States, we are asked to pay more than anyone else for that dubious privilege. Unlike in some UN member countries, the United States government is answerable to its people. As such, we have an obligation to acknowledge when our political and financial capital is being poorly spent. We have an obligation to demand more for our investment. And if our investment fails, we have an obligation to spend our resources in more productive ways. Those are the thoughts that come to mind when we consider the resolution before us today. The arguments about the President's decision to move the American embassy to Jerusalem have already been made. They are by now well known. The decision was in accordance to U.S. law dating back to 1995, and its position has been repeatedly endorsed by the American people ever since. The decision does not prejudge any final status issues, including Jerusalem's boundaries. The decision does not preclude a two-state solution if the parties agree to that. The decision does nothing to harm peace efforts. Rather, the President's decision reflects the will of the American people and our right as a nation to choose the location of our embassy. There is no need to describe it further. Instead, there is a larger point to make. The United States will remember this day in which it was singled out for for attack in the General Assembly for the very act of exercising our right as a sovereign nation. We will remember it when we are called upon to once again make the world's largest contribution to the United Nations. And we will remember it when so many countries come calling on us, as they so often do, to pay even more and to use our influence for their benefit. America will put our embassy in Jerusalem. That is what the American people want us to do, and it is the right thing to do. No vote in the United Nations will make any difference on that. But this vote will make a difference on how Americans look at the UN and on how we look at countries who disrespect us in the UN. And this vote will be remembered. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of the United States. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Israel.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is shameful for the United Nations that I must stand before you today. It is shameful that this meeting is even taking place. Jerusalem is the holiest place on earth for the Jewish people. It is the capital of the state of Israel. Period. It is a fact that simply cannot be disputed. King David declared Jerusalem the city of the Jewish people 3,000 years ago. The Jewish Bible mentions Jerusalem 660 times. Our prayers recall Jerusalem's holy name over and over again. As our Prime Minister, the first Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion, said, and I quote, "Jerusalem is an inseparable part of the history of Israel, of the faith of Israel." I am holding an original coin. It's from 67 AD. It says in Hebrew, and I quote, "Freedom of Zion." Look in the envelope in front of you. You will see you have a replica of the coin. It is clear evidence from the time of our Second Temple. It proves the ancient connection of Jews to Jerusalem. Our bond to Jerusalem is unbreakable. No UNESCO declaration, no empty speeches, no General Assembly resolution will ever drive us from Jerusalem. These are the facts this body does not want to hear. These are the facts this body wishes to ignore. So today, I will tell you about another unbreakable bond. The unbreakable bond of hypocrisy between the Palestinians and the United Nations. Some have cautioned that the United States decision is one-sided and harmful to peace. The opposite is true. It is the one-sided steps of the Palestinians and the UN that have pushed away peace for years. With every anti-Israel resolution, with every attack on my people, the UN has perfected its double standard. We are now sitting in an open session, an emergency session of the General Assembly. This session has been open since 1997. We live in a world that is full of conflict and war, but only when it comes to Israel, the one true democracy in the Middle East that this assembly remain in a constant open session. How many times has Israel reached its hand in peace since 1997? How many times have we offered the Palestinians to join us in dialogue? How many times have these calls for peace been rejected? All of us have lost count. When Prime Minister Barak offered the Palestinians a state in 2000, we were met with suicide bombers on our buses and shootings in our streets. In 2005, Prime Minister Sharon disengaged from Gaza. He removed every single Israeli home. You will not find any settlements, any occupation in Gaza anymore. Since then, we have been attacked again and again with rockets and missiles aimed at our civilians. Yet, this body was silent. The United States simply stated a fact. They officially declared what has always been true. Jerusalem has been and always will be the capital of the State of Israel. Those who support today's resolution are like puppets. You are puppets pulled by the strings of your Palestinian puppet masters. You are like marionettes forced to dance while the Palestinian leadership looks on with glee. You are blind to the lies, unaware of the manipulation surrounding you, just like a puppet. This vote is nothing more than a performance of delusion. The Palestinians know this resolution is a fraud. They know this resolution does absolutely nothing for the lives of the Palestinian people. They know it won't create jobs for their people. They know it won't provide better health care for the people of Ramallah or Gaza. No, this resolution is nothing more than a distraction. All it will do is tell the Palestinians they can continue rejecting peace. And if you vote for it, you are sanctioning that view. I thank those brave countries that do not support this resolution. You have not fallen prey to the puppet show before us. You are the defenders of real peace. You are the leaders who prove that no UN resolution can rewrite history. Because when a UN resolution designates Israel's presence in parts of Jerusalem as illegal, in reality, it designates the presence of the Jewish people at the Western Wall as illegal. Mr. President, for thousands of years, Jews had only partial access or were even banned completely from the Western Wall. Other nations, kingdoms, and empires that occupied Jerusalem over the centuries had no respect for freedom of religion. But when Israel was founded, we established a strong democracy. Our democracy is based on individual freedoms. One of those freedoms is the freedom of religion. And all these years later, our democracy and our commitment to those freedoms continue to thrive. We know Jerusalem is sacred to billions around the world. Israel respects all religions and encourages everyone to visit and pray in the holy city. Mr. President, there is a particular irony with today's resolution. Countries that sponsor today's resolution accuse the United States and Israel of violating international law. Countries like Yemen, where terror groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS find fertile ground. The irony continues. In every other scenario, this body preaches human rights and peace, but not when it comes to Israel. In fact, you completely ignore the horrific acts of terror that threaten Israeli citizens. These past 2 weeks alone, I've seen 23 rocket attacks by Hamas into Israel. We heard nothing from the UN. No Security Council meeting, no emergency session of the General Assembly, nothing. The PA threatened violence and days of rage, but the UN had no condemnation. Mr. President, let me be clear. Violence and terror must never be tolerated. If this body were really united for peace, it would pass a resolution condemning Palestinian violence. This resolution only encourages more violence and instability. It encourages the Palestinian leadership to continue on this dangerous path. You permit them to pursue violence in the name of Jerusalem, the city of peace. Mr. President, Israel is an optimistic country. We returned home after thousands of years in exile. We made the desert bloom and defended our country from countless attacks. 42 years ago, this body, here in the General Assembly, this body adopted a different, shameful resolution. It equated Zionism with racism. It took 16 long years for that hateful resolution to be revoked. I have no doubt that today's resolution will also end up in the trash bin of history. I have no doubt that the day will come when the entire international community will finally come to recognize Jerusalem as the eternal capital of the State of Israel. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Israel. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Bolivia. On behalf, the Assembly will now take a decision on draft resolution A/ES-10/L22, entitled Status of Jerusalem. For your information, the draft resolution has closed for e-sponsorship. I now give the floor to the representative of the Secretariat.
Thank you, Mr. President. I should like to announce that since the submission of the draft resolution, and in addition to those delegations listed on the L document, the following countries have also become co-sponsors of A/ES-10/L22. Algeria, Bahrain, Bangladesh, the plurinational state of Bolivia, Brunei Darussalam, Cuba, Djibouti, Ecuador, Egypt, Gambia, Indonesia, Iraq, Jordan, Kuwait, Lebanon, Libya, Malaysia, Maldives, Mauritania, Morocco, Oman, Pakistan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Senegal, Sudan, Syrian Arab Republic, Tunisia, United Arab Emirates, Uzbekistan, Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, and State of Palestine. I would also like to inform delegations that Afghanistan and Mali have withdrawn their sponsorship. If any other countries wish to co-sponsor A/ES/10/L22, please signify now by pressing the microphone button. South Africa, Comoros, and Somalia have also joined the list of delegations co-sponsoring the resolution, and Democratic Republic of Korea. Any others? Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. A recorded vote has been requested. We shall now begin the voting process. Those in favor of draft resolution A/ES-10/L22, please signify. Those against, abstentions.
The General Assembly is now voting on draft resolution A/ES-10/L22, entitled Status of Jerusalem. Will all delegations confirm that their votes are accurately reflected on the screen? The voting has been completed. Please lock the machine.
The result of the vote is as follows. In favor, 128. Against, 9. Abstentions, 35. Draft resolution A/ES-10/L22 is adopted.